Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything.
Welcome to Left to Black. I'm your host, Mark Anthony Neal. We're here in the John Hope Franklin Center at Duke University, where we are joined by Professor Crystal Sanders, who's Associate Professor of History and African American Studies at Penn State University and the just named Director of the Africana Research Center. She's also the author of the award-winning A Chance for Change, Headstart in Mississippi's Black Freedom Struggle, which was published in 2016 by University of North Carolina Press as part of their John Hope Franklin series in African American history and culture. How are you doing, Professor Sanders?
I'm doing well. I'm honored to be here.
Well, thank you. We're honored to have you on Left to Black. Can you set the scene for us for your book, right? I mean, there's interesting forces going on. Mm-hmm. There's a desire for voting rights. Mm-hmm. There's a war on poverty, mm-hmm. and there's a real concern about early childhood development mm-hmm. among African Americans. So, what is the setting for what creates this Head Start program that becomes so groundbreaking?
I think to really understand the magnitude and importance of the Head Start program that I write about, we have to go to Freedom Summer. Yeah. 1964, you see an influx of Northern college students trying to help African Americans in the state of Mississippi to register to vote. We know that local people from all over that state decide to form their own political party, the interracial Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and they go to New Jersey, in August of 1964. It's the Democratic National Convention, hoping to unseat that all-white state delegation representing Mississippi at the Democratic National Convention. And we know that they're not successful in being seated, right? And so the question becomes, what do they do next? Because given the morality of their cause, right, the righteousness of their cause, given the fact that 3 civil rights workers have been killed, it was assumed that at the national level, the Democratic Party would side with these working class African Americans and their white allies who were simply trying to fulfill really the promises of the Constitution. Right. And after that doesn't happen, people like Fannie Lou Hamer go home and they say, we can't stop organizing. But our next venue is going to be through education. We're going to try to focus on finding ways to create better futures for young people. And they say this in August of 1964, 2 weeks after she gets back from Atlantic City. She says, we have to look for new ways to organize, new ways of power. We have to educate our own children. And it's significant that she says this because months later, the Economic Opportunity Act that had been created in 1964, through the Community Action Program, Head Start is authorized. And so Head Start became a channel through which working class African Americans could create the type of educational opportunities that they wanted for black children in a place like Mississippi, where voting rights still had not made a difference in the lives of African Americans. It's Head Start that allows them to create new avenues of power.
Now, I was a Head Start kid. I was in Head Start beginning in 1969. I never knew of this broader history. If to the extent that I didn't know about the Mississippi connection to it. How successful was this Head Start program?
I mean, in my work, I argue that it was so successful that segregationists killed it. They killed this particular program in Mississippi because it not only prepared young people for the first grade, since Mississippi did not have public kindergartens, right? So that meant children had no formal education until they went to the first grade. So in addition to preparing black children for the first grade, it taught them black history. It taught them to be confident. It taught them to be assertive. It taught them to ask questions. And these were the types of things that the local white power structure did not want black children learning how to do.
It was really politicizing young black folks. I mean, the same kind of critique that Hoover is making of the Panthers, that he's proselytizing black radicalism through the breakfast program. Here you have a federally funded institution that is creating the context for that in Mississippi.
And it's celebrating blackness. And something that I found very interesting about the Mississippi case is that typically when we talk about segregated schools, black schools, my parents grew up in segregated schools. They talk about learning black history. They talk about seeing pictures of Booker T. Washington and Mary McLeod Bethune on the walls. But that was not the case in Mississippi's public schools. Even though these were segregated schools with black teachers and black principals, these individuals reported to white school boards. So black history was not taught in their schools. So that's why these women who formed the Head Start program that I write about were so committed to teaching 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds black history. Because they knew they would not get it in the public school system. So they wanted to really prepare them, give them a foundation to know who they were. So that despite what goes on once they enter the public school system, as they grow up in the state of Mississippi, at 4 years old and 5 years old, they're learning about Nat Turner. They're learning about Medgar Evers, and they're learning to be proud of themselves. They're learning to celebrate Blackness rather than be ashamed of it.
Yeah. Understanding the kind of distinctions between how the power structure in Mississippi viewed this and how the federal government viewed this, do you see a same level of political will around these issues of early childhood development in our contemporary political moment?
I think it's quite unfortunate that in our contemporary moment, we still have to make the case for early childhood education. There are many who don't believe that there are benefits to Head Start, who don't believe that the federal government should continue to support this as an initiative. But what we do know is
and
that
these are people paying $5,000 a month to send their kids.
exactly,
Right.
exactly, to
Right.
pre-Ks
To pre-K,
that
right.
are costing the same amount as Harvard or Duke,
Right.
But what we do know is that students who complete Head Start are more likely to graduate from high school. They're more likely to go on to college. So we know there are benefits to ensuring every child has some type of foundational support, educational support, before they enter formal schooling with kindergarten now, whereas it was the first grade when I write about Head Start in Mississippi. But I mean, I've gone to Washington and lobbied with Head Start parents to make that case that this program continues to matter. This is something we should all celebrate, something we should all support. But unfortunately, the same arguments that we were having to make, or that people were making in the 1960s, we're having to make in 2018 about the importance and effectiveness and utility of this program.
What do you say to those folks who always see structures like this as being remedial? And there's always a kind of shame and ambivalence in Black communities about things that they view as remedial, as if somehow early childhood can do anything but what it does.
Exactly.
Right?
I mean, in no way do I see Head Start as a remedial program or a compensatory program. It is a program ensuring that every child has a healthy start, a fair start, and a head start in order to reach their highest potential. In the same way that parents who are millionaires are ensuring that their child has medical screenings, that their child has had access to a doctor, that their child has learned their ABCs and their numbers. Head Start is ensuring that no matter where you live, what zip code you're in, whether your parents have the time to actually do these types of activities with you after they get off work, you've had exposure to these lessons. There's nothing remedial about it. It's in any way, it's just trying to make sure that we can have a starting line as close to the starting line as the most privileged children in the country.
You earned your PhD from Northwestern, but you are coming home to Duke. You're 2005 undergraduate. One of the people that you worked with here was the late Ray Gavins. Can you talk about, as we kind of segue into a conversation about mentoring, how important it was to have a faculty member, in this case a Black faculty member, who was really committed to your success?
I consider myself one of the most fortunate students to ever come through Duke, because literally my first day of classes my freshman year, I walked into a seminar taught by Dr. Ray Gavins. And from that first day, he became my mentor. He became someone who fostered my love of history, who told me I had the ability to be a historian, who nurtured my interest in Black educational history. In that first semester of my first year at Duke, he assigned the book, The Education of Blacks in the South by James Anderson. That book I loved. That book I still carry around like it's the Bible. The first time I met James Anderson, I happened to have the book on me, and I put it in his face and said, "Please sign this." So Dr. Gavins really was someone who believed in me, who poured into me, who told me that I have what it took to be a historian. And he literally was my mentor from the day I stepped foot on this campus until the day he passed. I last saw him about 2 weeks before he passed away, and we were talking about my book that very day. And so I'm grateful for his mentorship, I'm grateful for his friendship, and it's a huge loss for me and a huge loss for the field when we lost him.
You are here for the Summer Institute for Teaching and Professional Advancement, which is overseen by political scientist here at Duke, Carrie Haney. Talk about how important it is now to be in the other side of this, to be able to give back in a structured context, that notion of mentoring and how important it is.
I've had great mentors. We've mentioned Dr. Gabbins. I would say Nancy McLean. I would say Charles Payne. I would say Martha Biondi.
All great
And
folks,
these were all people who gave of themselves when they were at their busiest points in their own careers. If I had a question about my writing, if I had a question about my job, these people stopped what they were doing and they helped me. And that left an impression on me, right? That we have a responsibility to pay it forward. We have a responsibility to lift as we climb. That's what they've done, right? They're all great historians, great scholars who are well known, but at the same time, despite all of the awards, despite all of the publications, they have mentored people. They have read draft after draft. They have given comments. They've written letters. And that tells me that I have that same responsibility. And so I'm honored to participate in SITPA. I believe, Black women have been lifting as we climb for generations, right? And so that's in my DNA.
One of the things that's interesting about this moment, when we think about mentoring, I mean, you're of a cohort of historians now who are also doing very important public history or writing history for public audiences. The great work that AHIS is doing, through Black Perspectives being a great example of that. How important was it for you as you were thinking about writing a book like this and thinking about your own research agenda to making sure that there was some piece of that work that would be accessible to a broader non-academic audience?
I mean, I think there are direct ties between the ways Black Mississippians in 1965 organized for Headstart and the way I still see Black parents in Mississippi organizing to support and save public schools in that state, right? And I wanted to make those connections. I wanted people to see there's a long history of parents advocating for quality educational opportunities for their students. I wanted people to make that connection that the state of Mississippi has historically underfunded public schools. And that in spite of that fact, Black parents have given up themselves, right? They double taxed themselves to make up shortfalls. And so I tried to, I've illuminated that in the epilogue of the book. I've written op-eds, I've tried to make those connections, and I've spoken in Mississippi or in other places. I try to make these connections to say we can't leave this in the 1960s. These problems are still problems that we're dealing with today. So, the past is prologue.
We've been joined by Professor Crystal Sanders, who's a historian. She is an associate professor of history and African American studies at Penn State University, where she is now the just named director of the Africana Research Center. Let's talk about that real quickly. Are you excited?
I am very
about taking on this new role in your career?
I got to Penn State through the Africana Research Center because we have a postdoctoral fellowship program that brings in scholars from all over the country, people like Jasmine Cobb, who's now here at Duke. I first met her when she was an ARC postdoc. But I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to raising our visibility on campus and off campus. So we've got some new initiatives in the works. I'm hoping to partner with HBCUs. We're gearing up to commemorate the 400th anniversary of Africans entering what became the United States, August 1619, Jamestown. So we've got some good programming in the works, and I'm excited that I have the opportunity to lead the center and structure this programming in a way that I think celebrates the wonderful scholarship going on in Africa and the diaspora.
Professor Sanders is the author of the award-winning A Chance for Change, Headstart and Mississippi's Black Freedom Struggle, which is published by the University of North Carolina Press, 2016. Thank you for joining us on Left to Black.
Thank you for having me. I love this series.
Thank you.
Black lights and booze burn when I record for Watts. And every black like Troy Davis who never had a fair shot. All black everything, everything black. Culture over everything, y'all. We taking it back. Black.